So I'd like to thank everybody for coming. A lot of our students are here. Thank you for allowing us to change your schedule today. So let me tell you a little bit about Diane. I met Diane in 1975. I was 4. Not 100% true. I met Diane in 1975 when I was an X-ray student at Weber State College at the time. Diane was clinical instructor at what was then St. Benedict's Hospital on 30 Polk Avenue and 30th. So I learned a lot of good behavior, some not so good behavior. And then I had the privilege of coming to work with Diane 35 years ago at Weber State. So I watched her kids grow up from when they were very small in arms. And we've grown up together here at Weber State for the last 35 years. Diane is perfect for this presentation. She is past president of the Society of Diagnostic Medical Sonographers. She's an accomplished author. She's lectured around the world. She has served on accreditation agencies, certification agencies. She's done it all. What I did when she asked about doing this lecture, I said, you have to guarantee me you're not retiring, because when it says last lecture, I get the impression you're leaving. So we've made that perfectly clear. There was no combination between last lecture and your departing for the end of the season. But it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce to you Dr. Diane Kawamura to give her lecture on the original shades of gray.
Well, the original shades of gray is an interesting topic, and I really thank all of you for being here today. And when I determined what topic to use, I was mentioning some, and Bob was coming down the hall, boring. And I said, well, I think we need more shades of gray than just 50 for good riddance. Boring. And I said, well, what do you suggest? And he said, the original shades of gray. Oh, that left such room. I could do anything with that. And so someone contacted me and they said, oh, I need a little statement about this because it sounds so sexy. And so if you think this is going to be sexy, it's not. You can leave now. I might have a reference to a he or she or him or her, but no sexy, I'm not. And so with that being said, this is the Department of Radiologic Sciences. It's the most amazing department on campus, and I'm sorry if I've offended any other department at this time. But I'd like to just mention that the faculty of Radiologic Sciences have 2 PhDs, 3 faculty who are currently earning their doctorate degree, 5 tenured faculty, 3 full professors, and the faculty have over 25 certifications and credentials, and all of the staff have BS degrees or higher. And so it's really a great department to work for. And in addition to that, if you look at these numbers with that few people on a stairwell at Weber State, that when I came to Weber State in 1978, there were 15 to 18 students accepted per year in radiography. And nuclear medicine maybe had 2 or 3 students, and those were the programs here at Weber State. And then we are now the 2nd largest graduating unit at Weber State, where it's right underneath nursing. They have the largest, and then radiologic sciences. So it's a very, very impressive department. And as we approach our 50th anniversary, which will be next year, celebrating our Golden Jubilee, I encourage, and those of you who aren't familiar, we're in the building west of the stadium. come walk our halls and look at our images and look at all the multiple programs and the diversity for the Department of Radiologic Sciences. And I'd like to dedicate this to Michael Davenport. I'll try not. Okay, Michael started here at Weber State as one of our adjunct faculties in 1999. And he came and gave a lecture last year on May 14th in cardiac sonography. And after he gave his lecture, as he always did when he came down to teach, he came by and hugged me, and he said goodbye, and you don't know when goodbye is goodbye. That Sunday night, Michael died. So it wasn't just his last lecture. He left a legacy. He was a giant of a gentle giant, and a real tribute to education and professionalism. So to Michael. Okay, this is sort of divided up in different parts, and everybody who lectures knows that it's very difficult to give a presentation right after lunch, and sonographers have a term for it, postprandial, and it changes the whole blood flow and everything. And so we're going to start with that part of my journey. And my journey really began in 1895, well, a little before that, even though I wasn't born until 1946, but in 1885, some phenomenal things were happening worldwide. And so I'm going to take you through a journey of my life in this profession. And so the discovery of X-ray, what happened is there was a group of scientists worldwide, and they were working primarily with Crookes tube, and they were experimenting with cathode rays. And there was Hertz and Hittorf and Crookes and Lenard, Tesla and Roentgen. And Lenard notes helped Roentgen to really get prepared for what he was about to observe. And Lenard, for a long time, said, hey, you know what, guess what? I'm the one who discovered X-ray. And Tesla said, yeah, I discovered that before, Roentgen did, but all the evidence burned down in my warehouse and everything. And so this is actually taken of Nikola Tesla's hand in 1894. And then the one on your right is Wilhelm Conrad Röntgen's wife's hand, which was taken in 1895. And so Tesla actually had an X-ray before that, and that part didn't burn down in his warehouse. And Tesla wondered very, very much, why was the film fogging? Here I just got another box of film and it's fogged, as he was working with the cathode rays. And Tesla was a dreamer, and he also was somewhat outspoken. He once said, I don't care that they're taking all my ideas. I just care, and I'm really concerned they don't have any ideas of their own. And so Tesla was too advanced, he was too expensive, and he was so far ahead. He was the one who predicted cell phones, internet, wireless in the 1800s. And now he worked for Edison before this time. And Edison and Tesla sort of had some outings in that. And so Tesla did leave Edison. And Edison, though, he seized the moment. When there was a moment, he took it. Tesla, the dreamer. Edison, I'm the businessman. I'm going to seize the moment. I'm going to do something with all of these things that are being introduced in healthcare. So it was on November 8th, in 1885, Wilhelm Conrad Roentgen, who was kicked out of the school, by the way, because he wouldn't fess up and tell who wrote a caricature about one of the other professors. And so his parents moved to a different country, and it was hard for him to get his PhD. He sort of went around it in a roundabout way, but he earned it very much. And then he was a quiet man, and his wife Bertha, and he lived above the lab at their institute. And so he would go down and he'd work in his lab every day. And one day he was down there working on cathode rays, and he noticed that the invisible rays caused fluorescence on a cardboard screen that he had sitting over here on a bench. And he observed that, and that same thing was observed by others in the field, but they didn't do anything about that observation. Roentgen did. And he tested the idea that other tubes might also be causing that fluorescence, but it wasn't. It was the cathode ray tube that he was working on. And so he diligently performed multiple experiments from that Friday afternoon. It was cold and dingy and raining, and he worked every day with those. And he speculates that there was a new kind of ray that's responsible for what he had just observed. And he used the mathematical form X. I'll call it X. It's unknown. I haven't figured this out yet. The invisible ray. And so his discovery was no accident. His discovery was eminent. Somewhere, somebody was that close to doing it. The thing about Roentgen is they saw it. They didn't write about it. They didn't follow through on it. Roentgen did. And he had good methodology, and he had good research sense, and he documented. He scanned again. He documented. And so his diligent scientific methods, his noted variables, and I tried this, and I tried that, was the discovery. And that's why he should be credited with it. Because without that, where would we be? It would be another 10 or 15 years. But everybody was close, but Roentgen followed through with an observation. He used various materials to test with, and he noted lead would not expose. Nothing would fluoresce with lead. And so in essence, what he discovered was that lead provided radiation protection. No one would listen to him, but you could provide radiation protection, and all of our X-ray students know how important that is today. And so he reported on his investigation, and after a month of it, he wrote down, there's so much more that I haven't yet to identify. There has to be more properties to X-ray than what I see. And to date, this time, not any scientist has produced one more property than Roentgen. Roentgen found 12 properties, and no scientist has refuted them, edited them, added to them, deleted one of those properties. And so I'll just quickly go through. He wrote, they're highly penetrating, they're invisible, they're a form of electromagnetic radiation. He wrote that they're electrically neutral, and so they're not affected by electrical fields or magnetic fields. And he produced a wide variety, X-rays produce this wide variety of energies and a wide variety of wavelengths. They're polyenergetic. I wish we were polyenergetic at times. And they're heterogeneous. And he said they release small amounts of heat passing through matter like human soft tissue. And they travel in straight lines, always in straight lines, at the speed of light. And they can ionize matter. And that's what makes us more aware of taking care of our profession and our occupational exposures. They can fluoresce certain crystals. I just noticed at home about 4 weeks ago over here, a meter away, it was fluorescing because it was invisible, traveled in straight lines. You can't focus it, and it's going to affect photographic film. Well, Tesla figured that out. His film was fogging all the time. And it produces chemical and biological changes in matter through ionization. And then X-rays produce secondary scatter radiation. So again, absolutely amazing that here we are 130 years later, and not one of these 12 has been edited, added to. And yet all scientists and physicists said there are some properties out there we don't know about yet, but have not found those. And so it was late in December, in 1895 that Roentgen sent a preliminary report, and the 8 copies of that report what included Frau Roentgen's hand, Bertha, you saw it on the previously, and it was to be published in the Proceedings of Physico-Medical Society for Würzburg. And the name of that publication was the preliminary report on a new kind of rays. But he also predicted, and he asked, and he cautioned so much that there's going to be some effects. And he didn't know what those effects were, but the early history lessons from people who were experimenting with this new rays was it's going to cause reddening of the skin and severe radiation burns, hair loss, and anemia. And so Thomas Edison, I am the businessman, I'm going to seize the moment, that's Thomas Edison. He went into X-ray tube production, and he had so many ideas on future medical X-ray devices. He also had a very dear, trusted friend. His friend's name was Clarence Daly. And Clarence Daly was a great physicist, and he worked for Edison as his chief assistant. And Daly really worked very closely all of the time with all of these X-ray tubes. And he started developing radiation burns. And in 1902, his radiation burns were so extensive that they led to a very painful death. And he started to lose his tissues an inch at a time to take care of the radiation burns. And in 1904, Daly was the first fatality in the United States from radiation burns. And Edison lost a friend and a colleague. He shut down all of his X-ray manufacturing, all X-ray investigation, all of the facilities came to a halt and were locked up. He had great ideas, Edison. He had journals on what needs to be done next, but it was shut down because he lost his friend Daly. And then the profession grew. X-rays traveled, and the X-ray discovery very, very quickly. Radiologists and radiographers were aware of ionizing radiation exposure, and they are aware to this day that it increases the death rate of radiographers and radiologists. The huge study that is going on with the University of Minnesota with the American Registry of Radiologic Technologists shows evidence that more radiographers are getting some form of cancer. The incidence is higher than in other occupations. And there's reason for, don't be scared, students, there's reason for good X-ray protection, stand behind the barrier and all that. And so both professions, radiographers and radiologists, in those early years experienced increased fatality from leukemia and cancer. And the benefit of the radiologic procedure has to always ethically far outweigh the risk of receiving a small dose or some dose of radiation. And then as low as reasonably achievable is the radiation dose that Lara, it is the standard, it's the ethical, it's the moral care that we always try to achieve. There was an interesting event that happened in 1920 in the United States. There was a group of people who wanted to honor some of those early pioneers. And they said, well, what are we going to serve? And some woman came up and said, what we need to serve? We're going to serve chicken, because most of them don't have fingers anymore, and they can still eat chicken. And that's how those early pioneers were overexposed, but gave and contributed so much to the field. I'm going to give an abbreviated timeline, and this starts in 1873. Crookes designs a new cathode ray tube. If you want to see a cathode ray tube, let us know. We have one in our department. And it's just, you can come and look at it, don't touch. Just stand there in awe and wonder, wow, that's a Crookes cathode ray tube. And then in 1877, Pierre and Dox Curry, they discovered piezoelectricity. Without that, you know, we would still be struggling with things like sonar, radar, and ultrasound, all right? And so in November 8th, Rankin discovers X-rays. December 28th, Rankin publishes a paper. Now, how soon we hear about that just went viral? Well, imagine this, 1895, December 28th, 1895. There's no such thing as cell phones and Facebook and all that social media stuff. No internet, no CNN. None of that is existing. Few telephones, there's telegraph, those kinds of things. Did this go viral? What happened the next year? Oh, 1896, GE and Siemens begins to sell X-ray equipment. How fast did Rankin's news travel? Edison demonstrates the fluoroscope. H.S. Ward publishes Practical Radiography, which is the first textbook in 1896. And then William Rollins describes hazards in the story Notes on the X-ray Light. 1916, Marie Curie, what a woman, what a woman. She establishes mobile X-rays. She's having like little bake sales over there in Paris and a few places to buy pickups and X-ray equipment and raising money. I don't know if she baked, but she's raising money. And she then starts a training program in radiology for the military. And she's like the first original thinker of the MASH units. And so those people are learning how to drive a truck, those farm boys that came in from the wine fields, or the grape fields, and they're learning how to drive a truck and use X-ray equipment, get to the front and see who and how they can move certain people back to hospitals. And then 1953 to 1956, we got a little bit of a jump there. There's lots going on, but ultrasound was used to diagnose a hematoma in an infant's brain. It was used for M mode of the heart, motion mode. Doppler was first used for the speed of sound, and the police are still using it for radar detection. And then OBGYN was tried and was somewhat successful, and a midline shift of the brain indicated there must be some kind of mass shifting in the brain. In 1968 was the first Beck machines. In the first CT head unit, 1971, the whole body unit in 1972. In 1974, the first U.S. patent was issued for an MRI unit. In 1977, magnification mammography was established. And then there were some Nobel Prizes. Not enough, but there were some. In 1901, Dr. Rankin received the Nobel Prize in Physics, well-deserved. Well-deserved. And in 1903, Becquerel and the Curies received one in physics. Now, Marie and Pierre Curie were soulmates in physics. They loved each other, they were married, they were friends, they were collaborators, they were just favorite best buddies, and they were soulmates. And she was just devastated, but bounced right back to work. In 1906, it was a rainy day, April, and I think it's 1906. And Pierre was walking down the street in Paris, and he was in a hurry to get someplace, trying to catch up with Marie. And he was run over by a horse and a buggy, and he died. And it took Marie a little time, but she came right back. And in 1906, she received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. So not only was she the first female to receive a Nobel Prize recognition for her work, she was the first to receive 2 Nobel Prizes. 1979, Cormack and Hounsfield, CT. And then 2003, fairly recently, Lauterbur and Mansfield received the Nobel Prize, also in physiology or medicine, for the MRI unit. This is really one of my favorite cartoons, and there was this incident where somebody wrote a book about 50 Shades of Grey, and it went viral, and there's been a lot of sequence, but this kid is in the pediatric radiology waiting room yelling, "Mommy, I don't like these crayons," because he's got 50 shades of gray, but he does have 2 Doppler, red and blue. The blood does flow away from the transducer and towards the transducer. I want to talk about some of the other innovations that I have seen. When I left St. Benedict's Hospital to come to Weber State, we still have what was called stationary tabletops. And that means that they were stationary. And so if a patient walked into the room or if the patient came into the room with a wheelchair, we needed a step stool to get that patient up on the x-ray table. If they came on a cart, we'd get some help and move them over on a sheet. And so one of the innovations I thought was really something when I first saw was a floating tabletop. It went up, it went down, it went everywhere, and a patient could come in and they could sit down, you could raise it up, and you could move the whole tabletop where you needed the patient to be for the x-ray. But then I go back to when we had stationary tabletops, we always search for resolutions, how to make our jobs a little more easier, how to help patient care, and we discovered this sort of furniture polish wax used for dusting things was just excellent to put on the tabletop. Then you put your sheet, and then you put your patient, and you could really move your patient around so much easier. It was just a fabulous, innovative idea. And a few years ago, Sister Sandra came to visit our department. She's close to 90, and we were really excited to introduce her to the students and that. And so my job before she arrived to visit was get the waxy stuff out and clean all the tables, and I did, because this was really something. Now, the important part was get it on the tabletop. Do not let any of it get down on the vinyl linoleum floor, or you'd have the x-ray person down there on the floor, and it didn't help patient care at all. And then the other thing that was very innovative is some of the automatic film processors. We had film. Automatic film processors occupied a whole room. Wynn remembers this one at LDS Hospital, just went on, and you would put your film at one end, it would go through the developer, would go through the fixer, would go through the water, would go through the blow dryer, and would come out the other end. You'd have a radiograph all dry and that. We used to have wet tanks, and then the processors came. And so it was just phenomenal that we saw these get smaller and smaller and smaller, these film, and they went from a 14-minute, then it only took 11 minutes to get your film reproduced and everything, 7 minutes, 3 minutes, 90 seconds. It was amazing. Now, of course, we had to clean them. We'd pull out all the racks and rollers and things like that. But what happened is our equipment, a big innovation is film left the department. Rooms full of patient films. All the radiographs left departments. 2 years ago, I went to Gunnison Hospital, and there was this huge room. I said, what happened? We disposed of all of our film files. They electronically filed them, and so look at all that silver recovery that occurred there. Everything now is digital and computerized imaging, and so the films have left us completely. And now that's sort of what happened with the journey and where the journey began. And I'd like to now talk and focus on my journey where I moved from the farm to the city and some educational decisions I made, employment opportunities, met a man, got married, and have 2 children. Well, how about that for shades of gray? Not real original. Okay. My 9-month-old and 50-month-old, we moved from Onega, South Dakota in 1948 to Aberdeen, South Dakota when I was 2 years old in 1948, 63 miles. And then the 10-year-old picture, I think somebody mislabeled, I think it's the 9-year-old picture, it's the 4th grade picture. that was taken at St. Mary's School. I'd like to show you my family, and my family, my father, let's see, I have a pointer, right? Oh, there. My father didn't go to high school. He was the oldest of 10 children. He graduated, so we heard, from elementary school, a schoolhouse. And he wasn't a big fan of school or anything. He did enjoy his hard work. And then my mother, she didn't go to high school, but she wanted to. She so wanted to go to high school because then she could be a teacher. And with mother's situation was, she was an older, there were 4 children from her father's first marriage, and she was growing up and in the 8th grade. Her mother died, and her father married a second wife. And so some of his children, or her children, came into the family, but she died giving birth to twins. And so he married a few years later another woman, Margaret, Grandma Margaret. And so eventually, my mother had 24 sisters and brothers, stepsisters and brothers, half-sisters and brothers. And so she was asked not to go to high school, to please stay at home and take care of the family that kept growing and everything. So that was a big disappointment, but she was very, very much into learning. She loved to learn and that. And then these are my brothers and sisters here, and I'd like to introduce them sort of to you, because this is Victor. Victor earned a BA degree in theology. He went to a seminary, and about 9 months before he was supposed to be ordained a priest, he thought, no, I don't think this is quite right, and he joined the Air Force. And then Victor is dead now. He died last October. And then my sister here, this isn't me, this is my sister, Pat. And Pat went to X-ray school, and then she stayed pretty much in the Aberdeen area and then moved to Eugene, Oregon, and Missoula, Benson, Minnesota, Eugene, Oregon, Missoula, Montana. And Pat died in 1988 of breast cancer. And then came James. James left high school and he went right into the Air Force. And James died at age 21 in the Air Force. And so then there's me, and that was a high school picture. I'll tell you what I did in a few minutes. This was Mel. Mel went to college for a little while because there was something called the Vietnam draft. And so Mel went to college. And then he retired a couple of years ago, and now he's doing something he really loves, and that's taxidermy. And then there's Shirley, and I just refer to her, everybody hears me talking about Shirley Nurse. Shirley Nurse has 2 degrees. Shirley got her BS degree, her first one in medical lab science, and her second one in a different college as an RN, and she retired a couple years ago. And now she's doing something she just loves. This summer she got home in late August. She went out with her husband on custom combining, and they take the combines and they go down to Texas and they start cutting crops and coming back to South Dakota, and so she very much enjoys it. In 1964, I was in high school, and I had to sort of decide, what am I going to do after high school? Am I going to be like Vic or Pat or James, or what am I going to do? Michelle's going to go here, and Bonnie's going there, and Judy and my friends all had ideas. So I called Sister Jean over at St. Luke's Hospital and asked for an interview. She said, oh yeah, come on over. And so she was interviewing me. She goes, now you're Pat's sister. Yes. Oh, Pat was just one of our brilliant students. Oh yes, our family, 4 girls, 4 boys. 4 left-handed, 4 right-handed. All the left-handeds, I didn't point those out to you. They were always smarter. They had higher IQs. They excelled. I was right-handed, and Pat, Shirley, Those were, and James, they were our lefties in our family. And so Sister Jean said, oh, and your mom, she works down in the kitchen. And she did go down and start working in the kitchen when my younger sister went to kindergarten. My younger sister was the only child who went to kindergarten. And all the rest of us went right to first grade through the 9th grade and then off to some high school. And so Sister Jean said, you know what? We're going to give you one of the scholarships and for the X-ray school. And we're going to accept 4 people. We have 2 more. And they only accepted females, unmarried, and how times have changed. And we would receive $40 a month scholarship in our first year and $100 a month scholarship in our second year. And so I could sort of live on that. Plus I did have the job at Tanner's Piggly Wiggly store, which I got to keep. It's really the name of the store, it really is. And then with that, what it meant, which I found out once we started the program, is the first 6 months we took call with somebody. The second 6 months we were on call by ourselves for weeknights. And then the second year, when it jumped to $100, every 4th weekend we were taking call. And the X-ray program changed a little bit in that we were working 40 hours a week, and then we went to school in the afternoon or evening, but we had to make it all up. And we had 4,000 clinical hours in the 2 years of X-ray school. Well, the high school decision was to finish a program, and I chose X-ray because to me it was the quickest way of getting out of Aberdeen, South Dakota. And it truly it was. And I really couldn't afford college, and I didn't really know what I wanted to be. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer once, but this was a good way to leave. Now the writing on the bottom of this picture, my mother wrote that, July 1966, off to Ogden, Utah. And then I wanted, right before I left Aberdeen, my mother took me to Farmers and Merchants Bank, and she co-signed a loan for $250. And we went to the Montgomery Ward store and bought a trunk. And I packed up all my things in the trunk. And I had enough money because I was offered a job now in Ogden, Utah. It was for a private radiologist's office, and a few of us knew up in South Dakota that it was difficult for him to find some radiographers. And one of my classmates already moved to Ogden, Utah. And so this is in July, and I'll get to this Medicare thing. In 1965, President Johnson signed the Medicare bill in July of 1965, but it wasn't implemented until July 1, 1966. And I had some hours to make up in X-ray, so my classmates left, but I was still there on July 1. And what it meant when it was implemented is a division of image costs. And so we had 2 view chest radiographs, which we used to charge the patient $15 for an AP and a lateral chest X-ray. And a 1 view chest X-ray would be $10. And then what happened as of July 1, there was a $5 charge that was given on this side of the ledger, and a $10 charge for the radiography side of the ledger. And that's how Medicare divided the cost. And so I asked the question, and Dr. Leona McCarthy were working that day, and I said, so where does this $5 go? To their interpretation fee. But when we look at the price of radiographs today, it's just amazing that at that time, a sheet of 14 by 17 film was $1. The cassettes were $45 to $50 each, and single view or a knee or an ankle was a $10 charge to the patient. And the patients complained about it. $750 went to the hospital, $250 for interpretation fees. So that Thursday night I got on a bus and Mom kissed me goodbye. and I traveled to Ogden, Utah. I got here on Friday evening, it was about Friday. It was close to 1 o'clock in the morning, and my classmate was there waiting for me. And I got off the bus, and I was scared to death. I was ready to get back on the bus because outside, down on 25th Street, the Greyhound bus station, by the way, I went jackrabbits to Rapid City, South Dakota, where I was transferred to Continental Railway bus, where I got to Cheyenne, where I was transferred to Gray Line bus. And it was the first time I was that far west of South Dakota. But I got my wish. I got out of South Dakota with this job. And, you know, I got into that program easy. I got this job easy. And when I got off of that bus station that Friday night, Kathy was there waiting for me by a cab. That was the first time in my life I saw African Americans. And there were 6 or 10 of them standing there, and I'm not prejudiced in that. I didn't know what to think. I was scared. So I got in the cab and with Kathy White and all that, and we had an African American cab driver took us to the apartment. But it was a real eye-opener for me that I'm out of South Dakota and there's diversity and everything. And so that was something that was very different. And then when I went back to South Dakota to visit, they're still pretty white, Caucasian and everything. In 1967, then I was packing up. I was planning to leave. I had quit this radiologist's office, and so did my roommate. She had already left, and I was outside carrying out some things, and the man who lived over in I lived in apartment 26, he lived over in apartment 25, said, "Oh, I heard you were moving." And I said, "Yeah, pretty soon I am." And he said, "Would you like to go out for dinner?" And I said, "Oh, I'd like that very much." And so we went out for dinner. That was on May 17th, and May 18th, and May 19th, and May 20th. And then my parents came out a couple weeks later, but in the meantime, the radiologist asked me if I would please stay throughout the summer before I left, because he had to hire 2 people, and if I left right away, it would really put him on a hard spot. And I said, "Sure, I'll stay for the summer." And we went out June 1st and June 2nd. And I met Brian, and we just meshed and everything. And so in July, we went to visit the priest. Brian wasn't Catholic, but I was, and he had to get a dispensation. And I wrote my parents a letter, and then I said, "I'll call you on such and such a date." So we didn't call very often because it was expensive, and we had to go through a switchboard operator. And I called my parents, and I talked to my mother, and she was calm and cool. And then I talked to my dad, and my dad said, "Well, is he Catholic?" "Well, no. But we're going to get married in the church." "Oh, okay. Is he that Japanese kid I met?" "Well, he's really American, Dad. He was born in Denver, but yeah, you met him when you were here in May." And that. "Well, how come you're getting married so fast?" "I'm not pregnant yet." "Oh, okay, well, when I come out to your wedding," I said, "Oh yeah, bring Shirley because I need a maid of honor." And so they came out and we got married. And then after that, we went to South Dakota for a week, and then we went to Denver because my husband went to Lowry Air Force Base. He worked for Hill Air Force Base, went to Lowry Air Force Base. When we got back to Ogden, I called the radiologist, and told him I was back, and he said, "Well, come over." And he said, "You know, I've replaced you. I don't need you anymore." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I went home and I called the X-ray department at St. Benedict's Hospital. And they gave me, Sister Sandra was on the phone, and Sister Sandra said that, "You know what, you come over tomorrow about 10:30, 11. I'd love to meet you." And I went over, and I had my certificate and everything that I was certified. And I talked to Sister Sandra, And she said, now, what have you been doing? I said, well, for 13 and a half months, I worked for this position. You worked where for 13 and a half months? I repeated it, and she goes, you're hired. Can you start tomorrow? And I said, yes, I can. And she toured me in the department, introduced me to everybody, and then she said, oh, by the way, Thursday night, we need you to work from 4 o'clock to 11 because all of our department is going to a USRT meeting in Salt Lake City. And so I was literally there and on call within 2 days. And when I worked, when we got back from Denver, there was a policeman visiting various apartments, and he came to our apartment. He talked to my husband. There was a reported rapist in the neighborhood. They ruled Brian out because this reported rapist was tall and blonde, but they asked him to please be careful to know and watch when his wife comes home after dark to meet her and everything. And so Brian got into the habit when I went to St. Benedict's coming with me. And I taught him how to start up the department, start up the processor. He typed the patient identification card. He shut down the department when I took the patient back to the emergency room and everything. Can you imagine? That would never happen today. There's HIPAA, and he couldn't get through with the IgG, the criminal background check, all the immunization. It just would never happen in this day and age. But he was well known, and all the physicians knew Brian. And then with that being said, one of the things that happened was in the department was a switchboard operator. We didn't have cell phones and things, and they would page you over the loudspeaker. And she had a very, very thick accent from someplace, and she would page me, Mrs. Kawamura, Mrs. Kawamura. And so soon the joke was when Ryan and I came in the emergency room, oh, the Kawamanuras are here, and we were our patient, and that's our lovely daughter. She loved my hat. When I came home from work, I took off my hat. And so she's 5.5 months there. And then a picture of both of our children. And my husband was a firm believer that we vacationed together, we camped together. And the lower picture on the right is the Four Corners area, and that we're each standing in a different state there on Four Corners. Well, after working for 13 months and meeting Brian and going to St. Benedict's, I went from $1.18 an hour, and at St. Benedict's I was now going to get close to $2 an hour. And I was going to get sick leave, and I was going to get vacation, and so it was quite progressive. In 1971, I was called to Sister Luke, the administrator's office. Sister Sandra and I went there, and I was asked to be a clinical instructor, and this is the group of students here. And then why I have this newspaper clipping, and you probably can't read it very well, a local woman to lead radiologic sessions, and the radiologic sessions were going to be at Sherwood Hills, which is a brand new place here in Utah for the USRT meeting. And but if you read this newspaper account in 1974, not once does it use my name. I'm Mrs. Diane Kawamura. And so in part 3, I'm going to sum it up, I'm almost close. I had this educational challenge, and then I went to Weber State, and I want to talk about some professional involvement. In 1974, Brian earned his BS degree, and he was the 9th child in a family of 10, and many of them did not get college education. In 75, I got my associate degree. And in 1977, in December, I was offered a position to teach here at Weber State, and I took it. And then in 1978, I began teaching spring quarter here at Weber State. And I went from a $14,500 income down to a $12,500 income, and I was on soft money. And I didn't know what soft money was till the end of, spring quarter. Oh, I'm sorry. I came and started teaching winter quarter. It was the end of spring quarter, and the money was gone. I didn't have a job. I was unemployed. Oh my God, I was unemployed. And we had 15 to 18 first year and 15 to 18 second year students. And then in 1978, the program director had just completed a needs assessment and began to work on a sonography program. There were less than 10 certified sonographers in the state and a projected 50 to 100 pieces of ultrasound equipment. And the faculty members were offered this opportunity to learn sonography, develop the curriculum, become certified, and teach the program while teaching in radiography and visiting the clinical sites. And the two senior faculty, one of them right there, turned down this fabulous opportunity. And so I wanted to keep my teaching position. And I said, okay. And I resented it. But I was asked to learn all of these things, and it sort of put like a big burden on my plate. And so I had to go Concord Hospital on Monday for clinical education, teach Tuesday morning, go to class on Tuesday afternoon. We had physics consultants and everything. On Wednesday, I went to Primary Children's Hospital for clinical. Thursday, back on campus. On Friday, I went on to my clinical business. And then it was getting to be too much, and so I was able to go to McFady Hospital, and I met Laura Noreen. And Laura Noreen was so passionate about ultrasound. She called it adult etch-a-sketch, and she told the patients, we're going to draw pictures with echoes, and if it's not right, we'll just erase it, and we'll start again, and we're going to do the best images possible for you. And she was so enthusiastic, and she was so competent. Now, Doug Emerson was in the class with me going through sonography. 25 students started that sonography program, and all of those students were being paid by the hospital for their textbooks tuition. I worked here, so that was covered. And then with the physicists came from the physics department, and consultants covered all of the courses for us. And Doug wanted to be the best scanner. And so we would work together. I was developing the academics, and he was teaching me how to scan. So their plate was very full. In 1979, I finally got my BGS. In 1980, I became certified in sonography. 1981, I got my master's degree. Going backwards, 1982, I did a BS degree in sonography. And then in 1990, I was tenured and full professor. Didn't have to have a PhD. And then my next degree, that was a 10-year law, was in 1992 in educational administration. Became very involved, Dr. Walker told you that. And Tanya and I are going to start on the 4th edition of this textbook soon. Well, we sort of have started. And now I'll just sort of wrap it up because there's food over there. Okay, on that. I want to talk briefly about my great teachers, a professional anniversary, and some thoughts from my bulletin board. The great teachers I've had was my husband, our children, and my mother. Now, my mother, of course, got me in the formative years, and I had to learn the Baltimore Catechism and spelling words, and she just went from child to child. After we had dinner, the family rosary, and the dishes were done. But my mother and then my husband taught me so many things, and they taught me to love because they loved. They taught me to forgive because they could forgive. They taught me tolerance because they could tolerate. And they taught me all those things about life. There's one thing they didn't teach me, and there's one thing we need to teach all students, and that's how to graduate and how to say goodbye. And then our children, sometimes they intimidated me with how much they know, but they helped me with my stats. Can you believe that? They were in second and third grade, and they knew so much. And then there's all the students. And all the students now, I hear that they're traditionalists and baby boomers and Gen Xers and millennials. But you know what? We get these aha moments with students. And when I work with students, and they're telling me something, I get aha moments, because I love to learn. And then the song from the late 1950s, I know some of you weren't born yet, and early 1960s by Barbara Streisand is People. People who need people are the luckiest people in the world. And they teach you, and you can learn from them. So in July 6, 1964, is a very special holiday. I am amazed at what I have seen and everything. It's been a wonderful journey to have experienced from that time computerized digital radiography, mammography, bone densitometry, PET, CT, MRI, sonography, and so much more. And the advances just hold me in awe and wonder, and we're no longer using some dusting, polishing wax for our stationary tables and that. And from the bulletin board, I love these quotes. I try to take one day at a time, but sometimes several days attack me at once. You feel that way like this week, okay? You know, midterm, and I only have 5 tests to 1 5 tester. And then Jesse Jackson said, never look down on anybody unless you're helping him out. And then I love this, Eleanor Roosevelt's truly one of my heroes. A woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong she is until you put her in hot water. And Dalai Lama, there are only 2 days in the year that nothing can be done. One is called yesterday and the other is called tomorrow. So today is the right day for you to love, believe, do, and mostly love. On the bottom of my computer monitor, I have, today I did my best. Tomorrow I will do better. So when I shut down, I look at that. And if I didn't do very well today, I have to forgive myself, because tomorrow will soon become today, and I will bid again. Last year, or the last lecture was given by Brad Carroll, and Brad Carroll shared some 3 phrases of 3 words. In his last lecture, he said, I love you, let me help, and do unto others. And then he added to it, be compassionate, love one another. And I'd like to add on to that, love one another as you love yourself. And always love yourself. Take care of yourself. Be a person who needs people. Then you can love one another. Then you can be compassionate. But love yourself. It's very important. So that's the last lecture. So what's the original shades of gray? Each one of you is to pick out your very, very own shades of gray. And I've made the decision to wear a dress like this. I believe maybe one of the original shades of gray that Dr. Roentgen saw in his lab in 1895. This has been fun. Thank you so much for coming.